Okay. All right. Third time's a charm.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm here with my friend Lee Kupersmith. He moved to Fort Collins about 8 years ago, and Lee is a world-class violin builder and restorer. He's worked for shops in Chicago, Boston, New York, and continues to do so. And it's a real pleasure to have someone of Lee's caliber in the same town. And most of the things that I've learned about varnish and hide glue have been from Lee. Did you lose me, Ian?
We are still go.
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
just turned my camera off
So,
so I don't distract people with excessive hand
oh,
signs.
I see. All right. So, Lee has some photos on his computer, which it seems like we're not going to be able to see. So we'll do a shop tour, and Lee's got some projects that he can show you. Who wants to see pictures anyway? Um, but
If you wanted
uh,
to, if you have
mhm.
enough bandwidth to email them to me, I can share a screen on my end if you want to throw them in an email. I don't know if that's flying too close to the sun. Don't even worry about it. We'll get that.
uh, it might be because they're, I don't know, some kind of album that
Okay,
I don't know if it's
fair
going to
enough.
email easily, as
All
opposed,
right.
it's not just one picture.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just have Lee introduce himself. That's Lee's hand. All right.
Hey, everybody. Uh, Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity to have this little talk. A little bit about myself. I just kind of stumbled onto this profession as a random thing. I was a young kid, 34 years ago. Met a guy playing hockey. He worked on violins. Thought, hey, that sounds kind of interesting. One thing led to the next, and here I am. He happened to be working for a shop in Chicago called Bine and Fushi, and they at the time were considered probably one of the largest dealers in rare instruments. And so I just cut my teeth on student level stuff and worked my way up to chopping necks out of old Italian fiddles and doing every type of restoration work that's ever been required. And so that's pretty much what I do. I do build violins and violas on occasion, but primarily trained as a restorer.
Yeah.
So here's a project I'm currently working on. David Teckler cello, circa 1711. Had a terrible neck in it, so I did a neck graft. Obviously, putting new wood into it. This is the body behind me.
Here, I'll move closer to you.
It has various cracks and repairs and such. This is a new edge, new L edge that I put on here with the new buttons. The old one was just worn out and broken up and into pieces. And so just trying to make things more stable. Had a bunch of rib cracks all over the rib garland that I've cleaned and glued and reinforced, and now I'm doing the final kind of some of the cosmetic work to make it look like it's not as beat up as it truly is.
And how many hours do you think you'll have into
I'll
this?
probably have 700 hours into this when it's all said and done. Like, here's a full crack that wasn't open, so I left it, but there's a big crack here, a couple of base bar cracks that there's a big patch inside here, so I wasn't gonna monkey with that, but there's some cracks in here. This is all messed up, and it's like this one was kind of on a budget, so I couldn't really give it like all the time that it really deserved. But regardless, like it's turning out great, and this thing will be healthy for another 100 years probably.
Yeah. So when you say on an instrument like this that it's on a budget, like what kind of dollars are we talking about?
$50,000.
50,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it turned out to be 60. It really probably needed 80 or 90,000 bucks to really do it super nice. But it's coming out good. They're gonna get a nice return on their investment.
Yeah. If anybody has any questions, just go ahead and ask. And Ian,
How
it'd be helpful for
how
me once in a while if you could chime in and tell me that we're still coming
how
through.
I'm wondering, do do the repairs scale? Like I feel like the tensions are different, I know nothing about this, by the way. So, but
Sure.
like our cello repairs, do you have to like do some extra wizardry to keep them in line with all the extra string tension, or is there a lot of extra string tension? I just wonder, do you just scale up the repairs that you would do on a violin, or are there different things that
Yeah,
you have to do?
basically, you just scale it up. Unfortunately, I couldn't show you pictures, but I could show you all the inside work that I did do and what all those reinforcements look like. Obviously, they're all under tension. Working with this dimension here as far as the overstand and the string angle that you can get out of how the neck gets reset into the body can help.
Lee,
That tension's better.
could we take a look at what you did to the peg box in terms of grafting it on there?
Oh yeah.
And maybe you want to just bring that down a little bit right there and kind of describe what you had to do here.
So it's basically just a big mortise and tenon. Like someone this thing's had numerous necks, and the last people who did it did a terrible job. And so it made my job a lot more complicated to clean out the inside and then fit the new piece in there nicely. Now once you do, you dig it all out so it looks like the original peg box wall in a sense. And then I'll stain all this through various chemicals and inks and things like that. This interestingly enough, David Techler did a stock buildup on the head, and so this little piece here, it's about probably 5-6 millimeters here and 5-6 millimeters over here of this eye are added. Very unusual, but it's just something that he did stylistically. I don't know why he didn't have a thick enough piece of maple, but this one, so this is the original eye, and the other side had fallen off and disappeared into the ether. So I had to make a facsimile eye, and so that's something I've never had to do before because I've never seen that having been done. But
okay, and this is the original
yes,
headstock.
Yes,
and so yeah, so usually in guitars we're more trying to reattach headstocks to the original necks, and now you're attaching the original headstock to a new neck.
yes,
So
yep. So this was the old one.
oh, he's got the old neck here.
Oh
But
yeah.
this isn't the original either.
Oh, do you have any idea when this one was made?
Anybody's guess, really. It could have been 100 years ago.
Yeah.
80 years ago.
Okay, and was it like just an end grain break between the two?
No, I cut this off.
Okay.
Like, very coincidentally, this is another cello neck that I just did, and it was made by the same guy, but in 1723. Somebody drove it over with a minivan and just like, and it was in 13 different pieces. Back together for the sequence of how did it actually break, and it was a terrible pain in the ass to make that nice.
I bet. So okay, well that's one of your big projects you have going. I'm gonna swing the camera around and we'll start with a shop tour. We could start with your bench here. And Lee, do you want to tell us what's going on with we'll start with one of Ian's favorite subjects, which is airbrushing and varnish.
Okay. Clear varnish. It's Sandorak and super blonde shellac. Obviously, you can't see that because it's in a brown bottle. It's a pale yellow. You can see that, I'm not sure.
Can you see that,
Yep.
Ian?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Mixed in alcohol proportions, pretty simple. I do use a lot of inks, and so like this walnut ink is very handy. I used to use Pelican ink in their sepia, but that's become increasingly difficult to find. So this has been my replacement for that.
And when you say that's walnut ink, is that
It's just like walnut husks extracted the pigment that's in there. So it's just kind of a brown.
okay?
So it's a nice tinting brown.
Are those
Yes.
for modifying the bare wood, or is that going into the shellac to modify the color of the shellac?
No, I paint it directly onto the surfaces, and then I use my airbrush to basically put a clear skin over the ink that I use.
Okay.
Sometimes you can use it on raw wood, but it's really tricky because that stuff, raw wood, will accept a lot of material, and then it can get too dark too quick.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of this.
Oh,
delicate-
so you put
have to do
shellac
that.
down and then you paint onto the shellac and then seal it in.
Essentially, yes. And so, like, if I glue a crack together, there's a clean and glue a crack. It's usually pretty light where the glue interfaces, and so I have to get in there and kind of paint those edges
Mhm.
with tiny little dots
Mhm.
with small brushes, just kind of just dropping little bits and trying to stay off the glue, because any dark ink goes on the glue gets darker.
Yeah.
And so it's just this kind of crazy dance of like just trying to stay on the light spots.
And could you show us your airbrush setup?
Yeah, so this is an Iwata HPSB Plus Japanese gun, kind of expensive. This is just what my mentor and I use. I'm sure you could use a cheaper one, but because I'm spraying thinned out varnish, this can handle that capacity. Whereas I think some airbrushes settings are too fine to be able to squirt something that thick out of it, if you will. And then I just have this. Go ahead.
Oh, what size is your nozzle set on that?
Oh, I wouldn't know the answer to that question.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty tiny. It's quite fine. And then this is one that I use to just spray like inside work. And it's just a super cheap, like $30 fingernail brush. It's kind of junky, but this one's quite nice for spraying a real fine, even coat, just to seal things up.
Do you have to do anything special maintenance wise? I early on I sprayed some shellac through a airbrush and it gummed it up pretty good.
Yes, and so I use alcohol. So like just like Everclear or whatever. So every time I use this thing, I do this. That's why I don't have the end cap on there.
Yeah.
So I can clean. You have to clean it, because if you don't, then you forget, and that stuff gets dry in there. Then you have to soak the whole gun.
Yeah.
I do that more than I care to admit.
Well,
So it's whatever can wash that material up, you have to just keep cycling that through.
My airbrush has that end cap off of it too, like 100%.
Cool. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just taking that off every time you do that.
When I get an airbrush, I throw it directly into the garbage can. Like I'm just like, it's not ever going to be on there.
So that walnut ink, is that soluble in water and alcohol?
This is all water soluble. So the cool thing about the inks is you can mix up your color and test it, and if you like it, you just keep moving forward. But if you don't like it, you can just take a Q-tip and wipe it off and readjust. Whereas sometimes I'll use alcohol soluble pigments that if you use that, you can't just wipe it off. You have to alcohol clean it off, and then you can start getting into more headaches of ruining the finish and create smearing and just kind of nightmare stuff. So this gives me much better flexibility in
Okay.
that application.
And where is that walnut ink available from?
So I can get this at Jerry's Artorama. It's Tom Norton's original light fast water soluble acid free drawing ink. Tom Norton ink.com.
All right.
Sounds really fancy.
Plug. It's
Yeah.
cheap. Like this is $10 or something.
Yeah. And that's you're finding that I'm not familiar with the store that you said. Is that like a local art store or?
It's a chain. Like
Okay.
I don't know to how far it travels, or if it's a Midwestern thing, or but there's one down the street from here, so I'll just get it from them.
And Lee, do you want to come over on this side? Maybe you could take us through some of your edge tools over here.
I can get a lot of what I have to do done just with this simple setup. Like some shallow sweeped gouges. There's varying weights, or I mean widths. Few chisels, few gouges. Bridge cutting knife, use this quite regularly, doing artistic cutting on making bridges. There's some bench knives over there, like straight and curved. I get a lot of mileage out of these guys. Fitting bridge feet. Show you. Just a lot of like thin pulls like this, fitting this onto the top of a fiddle. Some people use chisels for that, kind of like this.
And it looks like you have a variety of Western style and some Japanese style.
Yeah, the Japanese stuff is really nice. It's like it's you can feel the cut is much more lively. It's like almost like you can feel it going through all of the grains or the fiber, more so than the Swiss made. But the Japanese stuff chips easier too. So like as a restorer, I'm going through a lot of glue, and the glue is just eating all the metal, and so it's like these things can be too sensitive for that. So like for me setting a new neck, this is a great tool. Got some of these blades here that this colleague of mine, she makes metal stuff. She makes these really amazing kitchen knives.
What's the name?
Her name is Ilan LeBlanc, and she was in Boston for a while, and I think she recently moved to Philly, but she has a Instagram page, and you can see some of her amazing work.
Okay, do you remember the name of the page?
It's just Elaine LeBlanc, so EILAINE LeBlanc, LABLANC.
Okay.
Super cool stuff. Sometimes she has stuff. Sometimes she sells blanks and stuff like this. And these things sharpen super nice and just cut amazing.
Yeah, and I noticed there's a hollow on the back, like in a
Yes.
Japanese style.
Oh yeah,
on those.
that looked like it'd be pretty good
Yeah,
for throwing up a dovetail on a guitar neck, Michael.
Yeah.
So she made this as a neck set knife, which is it's pretty cool, but it's also like kind of tricky because you don't have that flat edge as you're going down into the mortise, and so this leading edge can just dig into corners if you're not paying attention. Whereas this has like a flat side, so you're not catching that edge if you catch what I'm saying.
If anybody has a free hand, if you want to look
These
up,
are
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Lee if I couldn't quite tell if these were laminated steel or.
Yeah, it's all laminated and
Okay.
Yeah, she's like that's her like kind of her hobby is to make these things, and her kitchen knives are just absolutely stunning.
Wow.
She is an excellent craftsman.
This is quite beautiful.
Yeah, those are fun. I was
Yeah.
super psyched to be able to get some.
And what do these something like this cost?
I don't remember. I think this is maybe $150 or something.
Okay.
And it's whatever. I don't know steel gauges, but it's like carbon 26 or something. That's the stamp on there. So it's a factor of its hardness. I have to plead ignorance on that.
Okay.
She told me what it was, and it went in one ear and went the other.
Yeah. Something cool that's Lee has shown me in the past is that his some of his violin knives, they have this screw in the handle, so the blade comes out, and then it's much easier to sharpen on a wheel or a stone. So that's really handy, and I've been meaning to get something like this going in my shop.
Yeah, these these handles can be found. They can get them at International Violin. They're just a wholesaler or supplier, I guess, if you will. So easily findable.
Yeah.
The trick is getting a blade that's the right size for the handle. Like it's not a perfect science, so sometimes you have to get inside of here and hollow that out a little bit to get the blade to fit in. Otherwise, it's just too tight, if you will.
All right, and we're gonna swing around here, and we're gonna take a look inside some of Lee's tool cabinets. Which one do you want to start with, Lee? Okay. Oops.
That
And some of my go-to fingerboard templates for viola, violin, cello, and then sound post setters, sound post grabbers, dental mirrors for checking fits and things. I mean, really, like the fiddle shop's pretty simple. Some cello reamers. This is like end pin.
holy moly.
Look at that sucker.
Yeah,
Right.
if you had a
Spiral
bass
even.
like twice this big. Yeah, so this is kind of like modern. Like they've put a twist in there into the flute. It used to just be straight, and so it was real easy to start getting out around if you weren't paying careful attention. So that's pretty slick. These things are a couple $100. It's like
Yeah.
all these tools are ridiculously expensive. This one's kind of cool in that you like the ball end's kind of nice.
Just hold it down. a little
This
bit
ball
there.
end's kind of nice for fitting pegs. It just has a quick magnet, and you can put the T on it if you want,
Oh,
which
cool.
is very cool.
And
Here's a decent crack end crack clamp. Squeeze it on the edge and then tighten it. But typically, like if I'm gluing cracks, I'll glue some wood studs onto the inside, like pillars, and then you can put a wedge in there,
Mhm.
kind of like that, and put a clamp on this, and that wedge controls the outside edge angle, and then the two wedges, like you have really good clamping power. So like in the middle of a bout or something, like you can't effectively clamp across this and with a wide clamp without it distorting or doing something weird. So it pays to be able to take the time to do that pillar and wedge method. It's way superior. I came up with this idea of using these neomydium. Is that how you say that?
that's close enough.
Is that close
Yeah.
enough?
We'll allow
These
it.
magnets that are crazy strong, and so you can use that to as a clamp to basically put a stud on or a reinforcement on. It's super handy.
And what's this tool right there?
This is a bridge jack. So if you want to take the bridge off, strings will grab up here, and you can take the bridge off and straighten it if it's warped or whatever, things like that. These Stanley 102 planes are, for me, invaluable. I use them every day. Lee Nielsen makes copies, like replicas of these. Like they make really nice stuff.
You have a hot rod blade in those, or
No, actually, this one, these magnets. This one's an old Starrett hacksaw, like an industrial hacksaw blade, quite
Yeah.
hard. Maybe not the best thing. Like that just makes it sharpening more difficult. But we thought we were souping these things up back in the day, and I found that the Sweetheart planes that are the Sweetheart blades that Stanley made are still the best, in my opinion.
So you like the original Stanley better than the Lee Nielsen reproduction?
You know, it just depends. Like I've got both of like the low angle and the regular one, and they just kind of come in handy depending upon what you're doing. What I really like about the one like this 102 is when I have to clean up a top edge on the ribs. This thing really likes to eat well, whereas these guys you just don't quite have the same angle, and so I find the 102s work better for some things, and the Lee Nielsen's better for others.
All right.
Peg shavers, big pencil sharpeners. These Alberti design shavers are the nicest thing I've come across. Some of the other versions, the edges aren't protected, so you're turning this thing around and this is a live snaggly edge, and the next thing you know, you're cutting your fingers and whatnot. But these are a very nice tool. These are top-on clamps, obviously, just various clamps.
Pulling out.
These are the old. I've had these for 30 years, and now they're all starting to break. Just the materials just failed, so I had to buy a whole new set, which is sitting over there. As we get further down, it's just more random stuff. Micro mesh.
how often does are you using micro mesh for the finish?
Yeah. So for me, it works great to take off that sprayed kind of crust that happens when you're spraying, and just kind of knock that back with some 2400, and then probably more finishing with like 36. And then I typically French polish all the work out once it's all done. This is kind of a quirky violin tool. It's various millimeters of holes for the F holes. Like some people just cut that freehand, but this thing has it's like a little wing, like a knife edge that you can turn into the wood and create a 6 millimeter hole or an 8 millimeter hole.
I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a U-shaped head on that, and that's the knife edge that you would turn. So all right,
there's a bunch of glue pips I got from Michael.
How much?
Speaking of glue, you want to show us your glue setup, your high glue?
Sure. It's just right there. I'll grab a jar of it.
Yeah.
Michael, what's
So
that?
I just have a simple hot plate with a double boiler kind of thing. And then here's some of the raw glue unhydrated. It's Milligan and Higgins 162 gram strength is pretty much what I use. And then you can affect its strength by how thick or thin it is. Obviously, too thick a high glue doesn't do anybody any good. But I think high glue is usually thinner than most people think.
And something that's come up in the past is we've talked about using fresh high glue versus how long it's been cooked or reheated, a couple times. So
Yeah.
what's your kind of practices around that in terms of its longevity and strength?
Yeah. So sometimes if I'm putting the top on, I want some old glue to use for that. And so I'll kind of plan accordingly as this project's finishing up. Like this glue has been around, it's been heated up, probably probably been for a week, and so now it's getting kind of brown. So this is kind of at its last legs. If I'm gonna do a base bar, or if I'm gonna do a neck set, I'll just make up some fresh glue. And typically, I don't know if this is true. This is just something I've heard. Is that when you make a fresh batch of glue, it's good to heat it up, let it become soluble, let it cool back down because it something about the protein chain lengthens if you do that. And I could be totally making this up, but it's just something that I heard. And so then I'll let it cool down and then I heat it back up for the second time for the usage.
Any thoughts on that, Ian?
I was brought up to let it cool and then reheat it. I've moved away from it, and I
It's
hadn't
still
heard that. Like the way that we were mixing up glue when I was working at Gruen's was just to dump water onto the granules or vice versa. It was very kind of haphazard, and I think mostly it was because when you cooked it, it would froth up and it would get like this kind of head on the top of it, and so or it would just have air bubbles throughout it. And so when you chilled it, like the air bubbles would all come to the top, and then when you cooked it again, they would all be at the top and release immediately, so all the air bubbles were out of it. But I don't remember anybody saying anything about the proteins, but it
like
could be. It would be nice to find out, because
that. I mean,
if that was an edge, it would be an edge I would be interested in hearing about.
sure. Yeah, I don't know where I came across that. And like most stuff in the violin world, there's just so much weird conjecture and
Uh-huh.
myth and mythos and stuff. And so it's like your best opportunity is to just learn it for yourself and forget about most of what someone else has said. Not that you don't get good advice down the road, but it's just one of those things where it's like, like the violin's like, oh, these work so great because of the varnish. It's like, well, most of the original varnish is gone on that stuff. So
Uh-huh.
that's it's just a myth.
And let's see, Lee, you got some other glues here.
Yeah, this is something from Kramer Pigments. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. They're in New York and in
Yeah.
Germany. And this is just some fish glue. Uh, People are using it in New York, and so I was like, I had to place an order, so I tried this. It's nice and strong. It's easy to use at room temperature. It's kind of thick. Apparently, it has some sort of preservative in it, and some people might be sensitive to that. Um, but it's a great glue, and like I'll use it to glue the nuts on or saddles in or things like that, or like an emergency little edge crack thing or something. It's just kind of something nice to have. And then like this was these kind of worked hand in hand. Like this is just for nuts. Two little drops on the end of the inside of the nut to stick it to the fingerboard. Otherwise, that and then gluing a little skin on the bridge, like for the E string protector. That's all I use that for.
And Lee, you went and grabbed
Yeah, so this is just an old inkwell, and that's what I mix my inks in. And so here's the one that I use the most, and right now it's filthy because I've been busy. And unfortunately, I knocked it off the bench one day and broke it. But this is what I use to put my inks in and do all the ink work that I do.
Where
This
does
is
where do you
this
get
is
an
kind of
ink?
interesting. This is go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering where you source an inkwell at in 2024. Like, is that
eBay, Etsy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, they're still out there. This this was given to me by my mentor. Both of these were because like 35 years ago, like old hippies would find that stuff all over the place.
Hmm.
And so he had a big pile of them. I was like, cool, these are great. And now it's like, so what you can do is just get votive candle uh, holders. These are crazy cheap. And it's just basically the same thing. Like here's just here's some varnish that I mixed up and almost used up. But those are like $1 for 10 or something.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Do you just have
And
do you on your hide glue, going back to the hide glue, do you have a like a temperature that you'd figured out and then you just leave your heater at that at the
Yeah.
setting, or are you
So
not that concerned?
on my setting here, I just put it on just under 2, and that keeps it warm without it being like hot. Because at some point, this thing it'll start moving the jar around. It's going click 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 click, and I just can't handle that. So I found it doesn't need to be that warm. It just needs to get to the thickness that I prefer, and that can vary for different applications.
What do you, speaking of what do you like to apply the glue with? Do you have any kind of special brushes, or are you using
No, I just these throwaway
metal acid
brushes.
that is so unromantic in terms of our view of like, working on a cello from the 1700s to use a disposable acid brush.
Like I have these for cleaning some of it up, or crack cleaning. Like I have this like shorter, like I trimmed the bristles off so it's stiffer. So I'm hydrating the crack, and then I can get in with this one and kind of get all that crud to flush out of there. And sometimes the cheapest, just the most garbage things. Like this, I got at a grocery store, I think, and I cut it off. And for whatever reason, with these bristles, I'll be cleaning it up, and all of a sudden, all these bubbles are coming up, and I'm picking up more material than any of these other brushes. And so, go figure.
All right. And you had pulled this out. What is?
So this is Deft. I'll grab the can. That's been kind of dehydrated. I don't know if you can see that.
I'll hold this up.
And so that I use that to fill really deep cracks and pits and holes and stuff. And it dries really nice, and it dries like pretty thoroughly through. And so there isn't a whole lot of shrinkage. Not that it doesn't shrink, because it will over time, but it's pretty slick. Like we used to use the old school Deft, and we just fought the shrinkage so bad. But this new stuff really does work well.
And this is intentionally sort of let the solvents come off of it.
Left that in the garage for maybe a couple weeks, week and a half or something, and it just gets thicker.
Okay, and you would just drop this in with a brush.
Actually, I use a stick.
Okay,
some sort of pointed stick.
Is that
and it just go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, I was gonna say, is that satin or flat? Is that got a particular?
I think it's semi-gloss.
Semi-gloss, okay.
So this is semi-gloss brushing lacquer, and it says dries in 30 minutes. And if anybody's interested, it's part number DFT 011.
Cool.
Clear wood.
I'm sorry,
finish.
I didn't want to interrupt you about the stick. The stick looked like it was going to places.
Yeah, I have a sharpened end and a flat end, and then it just builds up on there, and just cut it off, and it's like you use it almost like a spatula.
And is that what's going on with? I'm just picking up stuff off the bench here.
Yeah, that's just for cleaning up under edge gluings and things like that. Just like a glue pick, if you will. Like I've got some of these dental spatulas. Like I do a lot of gluing with this guy. Just heat it up, put it in the pot, and then drag it across the crack, flex and pump the glue into the crack. And I mean, it's like these things are pretty invaluable for getting stuff out of hard to reach places. A nice scalpel, just kind of use the back edge of the tip, and can get stuff to start moving or get dark stuff out. That's the biggest trick for gluing cracks, is to make sure you can get all the dark out.
And so Lee, I noticed a very distinct lack of any power tools in your shop. Do you have any that you use?
I have a small bandsaw in the garage. I have a spindle sander that I got from Michael, when he didn't like, and
I forgot about that.
a grinder for grinding tools, and a recently purchased spindle sander, which has kind of helped for certain things.
Speaking
So
of a
pretty
grinder,
minimal power.
speaking of grinder, what kind of sharpening stuff do you like to
Oh
use?
yeah, these are my stones here. I forget who makes them. Michael, you probably remember.
They are Shapton.
Oh,
Yeah,
Shapton.
so I just have the 15, the 6, and the 10 or 8 or whatever this is. I
Mhm.
don't really use that one very much, just because I'm always going through glue and stuff. So I just need a good edge. I don't need a killer edge unless if I'm making something, and I don't have to worry about the glue. Then I'll use this one too. But these two can get you a long way.
And do you use a sharpening jig for like your plane blades, or you just
No,
do by
I
hand?
just freehand everything.
Okay.
Like these like hairspray bottles things are invaluable for wedding stuff. When I was in New York, nobody had ever even seen something like that. And so I'm like walking around shopping, where's the spray bottle?
Uh-huh.
They're like, what? So it's just interesting how people have just learned into the different methods and different little quirks.
What about the gouges?
This
Do
is
you
an
have-
old vinegar
Oh,
it's still all freehand.
yeah.
Even grinding. It's like I found the angles that I like, and I like to do, you know, there's a little bit of the hollow left, but I like to hollow grind everything, because that way you can be on the back edge and the tip and not have the middle rolling around. So if you can, with with a good hollow on there, it's just the best to get stuff super sharp. In my
How long
opinion,
when you were
some
getting
stuff is so small it's hard to keep it. Go ahead.
when you were getting trained and you were getting into it, how long did it take you to figure out that you had aptitude to do this at a high level?
You
Were you
know,
like were you
I
like 10
think,
minutes into it? You're like, this is for me.
yeah, kind of. It was one of those things like I didn't have a lot going for myself. I was just doing restaurant work, and um, so I just thought, oh, this could afford me a life in the country in Southwest Wisconsin. Like, I thought that was kind of cool, and I loved I loved wood, and I loved all these old instruments, and to see other people's work, and like I was really fortunate to get to work where I did. Like for 16 years, it was just heads down, like just heavy rotation of all this interesting stuff of the past. And so it was like I remember seeing my mentor like cutting the neck out of an instrument, which is I was like, I'd never do that, because it's like you're right there with the sharp saw, like right in that neck mortise, and cutting the button, and it's like that's just totally freaky. Like that fiddle might be worth $700,000 or something, and you got a saw that will go any slip, you're gonna go
Mhm.
wreaking some havoc, but eventually it just comes that you just like you feel confident enough to do it. And so then it just becomes this thing where it's like, oh, I get to get that done in 20 minutes or something.
Were you an orchestra kid before doing this, or did you have
No,
any background in playing?
nothing, nothing. I had no association with it whatsoever.
I know a lot of people that don't play, and I wonder if playing is sometimes a hindrance. Like, I mean, you got to
You
be able.
probably go both ways. I would see it as valuable as a maker, because it's like I can get my fiddle to a certain point, but then someone who really has chops and like they're really looking for like that extra bandwidth of subtlety and nuance, I get lost there.
Mhm.
So if I was an accomplished player, I think that could be an advantage, but I can also see it being a hindrance for sure.
So Lee, I'm going to give a kind of a sweep of the shop here, and then so I got a computer workstation, and then this is the workbench we were just at with the airbrushes and sharpening stones. There's more of a traditional woodworking bench over here, and then
Just some storage.
yeah, some storage, tool cabinets. So really pretty minimalist. I'd say this room is maybe like 12 by 10.
Probably.
And yeah, so when I think about my shop and and all the baggage,
Yeah.
I'm a little jealous. But anyway, I'm gonna sit back down with Lee, and there's another topic that I'd be interested to hear him talk about. Yeah. All right.
If anybody has any questions, I'm open to answer whatever I can.
Yeah. So as kind of low tech as we've and kind of hand tool orientated that Lee's shop is, I've also known Lee to use some laser scan pieces and
Oh yeah.
so can you tell us about maybe how you've integrated some of the technology?
Yeah. So recently, I
don't know if this is going to work, but why don't you pull up the picture on your screen there? The pictures on your screen, maybe make it big, and I'll see if I can switch this around. And
so there's some pretty clever people out there doing some modern robot work.
Maximize that. Okay, there we go.
And so that's all of the under of the channel behind us, all of the tear off. It was pretty bad. And so the options are to like thin it and put new wood in there, which is long, tedious, and not fun, and kind of a mess. Or just put putty in there, or get a laser scan and have your buddy cut it out on a rope with his robot, and then that fits in almost like a puzzle piece, and it is absolutely slick. And so that's the inside of that cello, and so all that white wood on the under edge that's all of those pieces that I just showed you guys.
Can you make that picture bigger?
I don't know if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little better.
Yeah.
So this is all laser scanned wood fill. Is that right?
Yep, that's
Wow.
exactly right.
Oh.
I've never done it. I've seen people do it, like people posting stuff online. There's a couple of people. There's this guy in Illinois does it. There's a guy out in Washington doing some cool stuff like that. And so, and then the steel worker gal, Elaine, she has a machine to do some of that too. I think they're doing some of that stuff at Ruining and Son too. So it's definitely gonna be it's gonna be a tool that's gonna be in any of the shops in the future for sure.
Yeah, it's not going backwards, is it? Like nobody's holding on, because you're right. Like it would be time, like just cost prohibitive even on an expensive instrument to go around there and hand fit each one of those little.
I think we could probably
make this work.
go through some of these pictures. I just want to get this on a tripod, but if you could make the pictures as big as possible,
okay,
that would be helpful.
So this first picture is
hold on a second.
Is like the announcement of this talk. That's what that looked like before. That's what it looked like when I got it.
This was the headstock that was grafted on to the neck before it was grafted on.
Yeah. So this is that same scroll that was the header for this discussion, if you will. That's what it looked like before I fixed it.
That red varnish seems to stick out a little bit. Was that just?
Yeah, it's a little. Somebody kind of missed the tone there. So I'll just show you some of these goofy repairs I've had to do. So somebody got into this fiddle and changed the Eiffel patterns, shapes. And so I always have to take that stuff out and replace it. And so that is now this.
Ooh,
Do you have any pictures of some process of doing that?
I don't think I do.
Okay. Well, I don't believe that you did it because it looks great. Wow.
That's a Giuseppe Delaglio violin from like 1720.
what's that one? It looks like it
There's a
maybe
modern fiddle.
had a problem with the output jack, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's his cello or his violin rib. That's the before. That's the after, but not quite finished. I forgot to get a full finished picture of that. So this still needs to be filled and retouched a little bit, but it turned out quite good. I made a counterpart for that and kind of turned it into a little sandwich. Fortunately, I had all the original pieces.
Ian, I think there's a question in the chat,
Let me see.
but I don't have access to that.
For the deft clear wood finish brushing lacquer, is it harsh enough that you're ventilating the space? If so, how are you approaching that?
If I typically put it on at the end of the day and then leave the room, or
Yeah,
sometimes I'll go outside, or it is a little stinky, but it's not terrible.
it's got an interesting grit to it that it's
It does.
it's not quite like lacquer. There's a little something, there's a little something a little
Yeah,
spicier in there.
yeah. Here's a Stefano Scarampella fiddle that came to me that I needed to restore. The F-hole was all messed up. It was somebody had dug this out and just made it a mess. And then after some time, that's
yeah.
the same fiddle finished
What
up. So I poured a plaster mold. I corrected and pressed this out and then patched in behind it to rebuild that reflection correctly.
what percentage of your work is stuff that's come to you after somebody got into it and then they realized they were in over their heads?
Almost all of it.
Yeah.
That's all I really do, is redo other people's work.
Does it bother you anymore, or is that just the gig?
It's just what it is.
Yeah.
It keeps you employed.
So it keeps me employed. So a lot of this stuff, it's like it's just appreciated value so much through the years that it, before it wasn't worth so much, and now it's worth probably too much. So here's an example of a bad crack that was just packed full of putty.
Holy moly.
And so I went from that, and there's me in the process of retouching that. So what I did is I oriented shavings from another piece of wood, and I turned that into like a little bathtub, if you will, and then I glued that shaving in. So there's probably 12 or 13 different shavings that I popped in here,
just to break that
glued in
cross
with white
grain.
glue. Yep. And so I get the rays to match. Like you can see, like the more you can get the original flecking of the ray to line up, or you get a grain to line up, like I did right here. Like this is a shaving, this is a shaving, this is a shaving, and so you can see how it mimics the original. Like, and so from one angle, like from straight on, it looks pretty good. Like this is like halfway done. And then I think I have a picture of it finished, but maybe I missed it.
Which white glue are you using to do that?
Just Elmer's or that Gorilla Glue. And sometimes, so like you can push it down with your finger and get some squeeze out and start to clean that up a little bit. And then I'll get stuff like, I'll use these little pieces of like, this carpet backer. Yeah, you just put.
Yeah, just hold it.
Like, just these little pieces of foam
Yeah.
and a piece of plexiglass, and then use that as a masher, and then let that dry, and then scrape the pieces down, scrape the wood down, and then figure out how to retouch it.
How hard are you working to get pieces of wood with like the run out right so that it's like when you roll under?
It's super critical because like there's a reflective bounce across the wood, and that's the whole trick when you're putting new wood into something, is to catch that bounce correctly. And in a situation like this, very, very difficult to get all the bounce right.
Yeah.
And so I try my best, and it works, but like if you held that fiddle at a 45-degree angle, something's gonna shoot out at
Something's gonna give.
a different bounce. Yeah.
I
So
don't know if you
you try
know this,
your
but
best.
that just made me feel a lot better about some of my projects.
So this was a cello rib puncture that I had to do. Actually, this is the first time I went to New York. They didn't have anyone who was comfortable trying to fix this. And so with the same technique of putting some little shavings in and retouching, that's the final product.
Really nice.
You can kind of see
There's
there's
looks great.
some shenanigans in there, but it got to the point where I was having a hard time seeing it too. So when that happens, I feel good about that.
And then Lee, just to clarify, could you bring that picture up
This
again?
one?
Yeah. So there's actually new shavings of wood that you've laid into this.
Yes.
You're not just working with what was there.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So I found an old piece of wood in the shop because it had a nice color. It's a similar color, and then oriented the rays again. Like,
do you have some like
this little pit was gone, you know, like, so like I had to find something for that, and for some pieces in here that had just disappeared.
you ever throw like a strategic wound over a spot, like put a scratch in it, like, or something?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like, so it's like you have like this thing here, like
Yeah.
you can it's like it just becomes like a magic trick. You're just trying to deceive the eye, if you will. And so, you know, like something like this, you got all this texture and black and stuff. So if you had to fix something in there, you have the liberty of like adding more of that kind of patina across it. This is a Maggini viola. It was the guy who built it died in 1630 of the plague.
I hope you wear gloves.
And so this is an interesting piece of modern technology. We CT scanned this instrument.
Oh wow!
And that's a cross section of the scroll, and it looked as though the scroll had a peg box graft to it, but through this forensics we can see that these grain lines, the actual tree grain lines line up. So it's just a break. So that actually helped the value of this instrument, knowing that this bottom part wasn't unoriginal. It was still all good. And here it is from the other side.
What's the path to getting a CT scan of an instrument?
You just go to an imaging service, and they look at you kind of funny, and then they say, oh, okay.
What does that cost?
It's like $300.
Ooh, that's not bad.
And it's not bad. Yeah, it's like there's like some places are quite expensive, and other places are much cheaper.
How many
like all that technological stuff, it's all changing.
How many images did they give you? Because that'll like, is that one where you can actually? No, it's not the one that'll slice the images, right? Like
it is.
It doesn't like,
so you get thousands of slices, so you can just, so this guy converted it into an MP3 kind of player. So it's like a movie. It's like a moving movie, and then you can just stop it at any point to see like whatever it is that you want to look at. It was pretty fascinating.
So that's some real forensic like forensic stuff. Like you're really getting in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like this viola right here is like $2 million or something. And so if you're
Yeah.
going to spend that kind of money, you want to know like how many people have been monkeying around in the cracks and if there's worms and all that kind of stuff, you know. So that's partly why like most of this modern, really fancy stuff is all that all comes with a scan.
Is anybody doing anything with spectrographs to like ID finish or anything like that?
Well, you can. I use a black light on a regular basis to check fluorescence, and so you could see like other people's work on there, and find out what the more closely what the original should be and looks like.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's all that stuff starting to come into play for sure.
Mhm.
This is what I was trying to explain was like that wedge and pillar clamp uh, clamping for cracks.
So
Like
explain what
this
the wedge is doing.
this the wedge controls the outside shape of the instrument. So if I push this in further, it changes the relationship of the arching on the outside.
Okay.
So I want that to mimic what that is. And so it's a very precise way of being able to close something and get real strength into the clamping. And these are just pieces of willow that I glued onto the top, and then I cut these off short with a saw, and then I just kind of take a chisel and flake off little pieces to get that to remove that.
So these are these are glued to the top, and that allows you to put pressure
Yes.
downwards. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
What gram strength are you using on those? Is that still the 160?
I use white glue there.
Okay.
And sometimes that'll tear out depending upon how aggressive of a chunk you're trying to pull out of there. But those things like if it's bad, like sometimes you can recover it off the piece and or put a reinforcement stud over it. This is a buddy of mine carved this.
That's
He was
nice.
his name is Hayato. He's from Japan originally. He lived in Cremona for 20 years, and then he went to New York, and he carved this viola da gamba head, which was absolutely mind blowing to me.
It's a really
Like
pleasant face.
he is just a master. It almost has like it has like a soul to it. Most of these things, when you see these fancy carved things, they look kind of like just kind of dead. But this thing has almost had animation to it. That's how good it was.
How do you go about finishing something like that? Would you just
So he just put so he sealed this up somehow. I'm not sure what he used. Like sometimes like people will seal the raw wood up with just egg whites, like a frost up egg white, and let that the liquid, like retrieve the liquid out from all the like basically a meringue, and then like you can use it as a clear sealer over the wood, and then he just varnished it. I don't have a picture of it finished, unfortunately.
That neck graft looks interesting. Is that worm damage on that neck, or what is
This? Oh yeah, so this is kind of interesting. So this is this is this is a Ruggieri violin, so contemporary of Stradivari's in town, and was its original neck that they have like spliced on all these pieces and reset it. And that could be some worm damage that's just been monkeyed with. And so the day before I went out on one of my trips, this guy knocked his iPad off and broke the neck out. And so there it is. And this neck, it was just a mess. Like it had been cracked before. So this neck was 332 years old. And they're like, can you do a neck graft? And I was like, all right. So there's me cutting. And these original necks are so rare. There's like 3 of them left or something. So it was like this big kind of deal.
What's
to even perform it.
what when you're gonna tackle something like that, like do you take when you wake up in the morning, do you take like like a spiritual inventory of yourself and try to decide
Yeah,
whether today's the day?
yeah, pretty much. Like
Yeah.
this thing sat on my bench for a few days, and I was just like, well, today's the day.
Today's the day. Was there anything
And
in
so,
particular that you
no, I do this every day when I come into work. I just kind of ask whatever's ahead in front of me, like what one's speaking the loudest to me, and
uh
move forward there instead of having a list and trying to check off the boxes. Because I
yeah,
found that if I do lists, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that didn't turn out like I wanted to, and so now I have to do it over. So now I lost the day.
yeah.
Instead, um, I just move forward um, with what seems to be calling my name, if you will.
Yeah.
Here's that other scroll. How it came to me.
This is the one we saw earlier.
No, this is a different one.
Oh, okay.
Like this was tricky to figure out. Like this has just got all bent over. But I soaked this in some water, like carefully soaked it in water, and it kind of started to puff back up a little bit. And then I built some counterparts and got it all back together. I got it to here, and then to here, and then there it is, finished.
Really nice.
Great.
No,
Is that
thank you. So I was able to take some inside wood because I had to reinforce the inside here. Is like I dug this out like a big square in here, a rectangle. So it reinforced that. So I was able to take some of that inside wood and do like a little decal kind of shaving thing on the outside, and that helps a lot to be able to use some original wood.
that a side replacement going on down there, or
No,
This one.
this one. Yeah, that's just a quirky picture of like I glued this rib on and onto the back, and then I was like, I'll just put the top on and see what this looks like
oh,
without
okay.
its other rib. So there's some of the inside work of that cello.
Uh,
Like this piece was someone else had put that in there, and I was like, oh, it was still solid, so I left it. It's funky and kind of weird, so I kind of like to leave some of that stuff when I can.
what's your
So
those are decisions that you're probably not going over each one of those decisions with your customer, or are you? Do you give people updates? You're like, hey, I found this reinforcement. It's better to leave it than to take it out. Like, how do you what's your communication with your customers like on a
You
lot of
know,
this stuff?
a lot of the stuff is I worked with shops, and
Yeah.
through the years of doing this, they don't really like to be bothered. They just want their piece to come back looking like money.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like I'd never done the repair like this. Like there it is starting to come back together. And there's some of that reinforcing wood that I put in the bottom part first. So these guys were like, yeah, just get it back together as best you can.
Do you
There
ever
it is,
have
like dug out.
have you ever had problems with shops misrepresenting work or trying to pass stuff off as having not happened or any of that kind of stuff? Like,
Um, I'm sure like this is obviously will need to be disclosed because they know what happened. So that's as good as I could get this back together. And that's what was missing. There's a little bit of nonsense over here too. It was super crazy to like have to work on this thing because everything's a curve. And so like I had to come up with this elaborate clamping thing just to get it to put it back into one piece again.
mm-hmm.
And so like whatever it takes is whatever it takes. Like if someone else did this, they'd probably take a completely different approach to it. But I was happy that it turned out as well as it did. Like this side is like great. Like you can't, like there's a big
Yeah.
crack right here. Like big crack here, big crack here, one going across here. It's like I was able to get that side like super nice. The other side, you can see it at certain angles, but for the most part, it's it's pretty darn good. Like even the back here, like 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 there's the
Yeah.
wound that goes across, and that's about as good as you can get that without like killing yourself.
Yeah, it's cross grain, and you probably wouldn't want to do that shaving technique over that because
You can't. Yeah, it's like that
you
stuff is so hard to work with. Like I've done it. I did a couple of overlays in here for sure. Like maybe right here, I think there's a big missing chunk.
but you still need that peg box to be strong.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
it's
so people would typically, like in this situation here, they would cut this top edge of the peg box out, and I wanted to save that, so I was able to hide that underneath the lip here. It created a whole
Oh
lot more
yeah,
work for me, but it effectively rendered the repair invisible.
yeah.
Because someday someone else can maybe get a computer in there and do an even better job or whatever, laser scan. And
Hmm.
so I try to save as much original wood as I possibly can.
So Lee, what do you do when you have a, potentially instrument that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to maybe millions, in your shop in terms of like liability and shipping and all those things?
Yeah, it's so a lot of times the shop that I'm working for they have a certain level of coverage. Some of the stuff is too fancy to ship, and just because of if it was ever a loss, it's just too much to recover. So a lot of times it's people are flying this stuff. Like I'll go pick it up, buy a seat for the cello, fly it home. I've had people fly out here and pick stuff up and fly it back. I've met people in airports. Um, I have a certain amount of coverage here, but it's real easy for me to be outside my coverage range. Just you know, one or two instruments I can get outside that. So I have a big safe that I keep everything in, and just try to keep a low profile on my social media stuff so people aren't keen on what I'm working on, kind of.
Yeah.
Did your
And
coverage include like accidents that might happen while you're working on them, or is it just for theft and
It's
fire and all that?
it's just yeah, it's just for loss basically. Like um if I made some sort of mistake, I just have to fix it.
Uh, lucky you know a guy.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was working on that neck graft, Julie comes walking back. She's like, "Hey, you want to see a nice violin?" And I was like, "Or a nice fiddle?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And she hands me this thing, and it was just stunning. It's like it's almost radiant and luminous in its self. And it's really hard to take pictures of violins because they're so curvy and they catch light and all that stuff. But this is the Jupiter Strad, built in 1728, and it is an absolute gem.
is that currently getting played professionally?
Yes. So it's owned by a foundation in Japan called the Nippon Foundation, and they loan these things out to promising players. And so when you're in New York, just the wildest stuff just walks through the door.
Hmm.
Like this fiddle, Isaac Stern played most of his career on. It's the East Side del Jesu. Some young kid has it right now and playing it all over the world,
What
and it sounds incredible.
what the color pattern on that is that from where? Is that
Yes,
from
but
UV?
no, it's just people touching it, sweating on it, uh, carrying it around, cufflinks, fingernails, all those things come in to create this look. Like this is what a 300-year-old fiddle looks like typically. Very worn in the middle. Most of this is all gone from shoulders. This is upper hand where this is just holding on to it while they're like reading music or talking about the concert or whatever. Like that's somebody's thumb touching right here. It's those are just typical wear patterns, and every one of them is different, of course.
So how long would that be in like,
Um,
how would that long would that be in somebody's possession? Like, you know, was that like his, when it was at Sox, was it his career instrument, like for the
yeah,
entire run?
yeah, he played that thing for probably 50 years. Um,
How does somebody go, yeah, I'm next. I'll have it
yeah,
after him.
yeah,
Like,
it's these things are so sought after and just crazy. Like, so this is these things have they have these illustrious pasts, and this is what is referred to as the ex Huberman Stradivari. And so this is currently owned by Josh Bell, but Huberman played Carnegie Hall, and that night he was playing on his Del Jesu, and somebody came in, slipped the security guard a cigar, and he swiped this thing. He
really?
just took it. Yep. And the interesting story is this guy, he kind of put shoe polish all over it to make so you couldn't really see what it was. But he played this thing for the rest of his life in a 2 block radius of Carnegie Hall.
Uh-huh.
And on his deathbed, he told his wife to take this violin to the Rene Morel shop. They'll know what to do. And he had saved every article ever written about its theft, and it was in the case. And so this thing just pops back up in the violin world, and the J&A beer shop in London spent like 2 years cleaning it up and fixing it back up. And Josh Bell happened to be in town to play concert the following night, and they said, "Hey, would you like to try the ex Huberman Strad?" And he said, "Within 3 seconds, I knew this is the violin I've been looking for my whole life."
Uh-huh.
And it had been sold to a Russian oligarch, which is where unfortunately a lot of the shit's going. Um, and somehow they renegotiated the deal, and this is Josh's. So it's Josh's now.
Mhm. Any idea what kind of money changed hands over that thing? Are they?
I don't, but I'm assuming it's close to 15 million bucks.
Yeah.
So this fiddle, I don't know if I have a, yeah, so this fiddle here, this is alleged to be the finest sounding violin on the planet. And it's the Vuitton Del Jesu, and that sold 10 years ago for 18 million bucks. And that was the record at the time.
And Lee, you have pictures of these from working in the New York shop?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the kind of stuff that just shows up when you're
What
there.
kind of,
Are these instruments that you actually got to work on, or they just sort of passed through the shop when you were there?
Yeah, I did a little bit of stuff to these things, but pretty minimal.
what kind of number
I loved it.
does it change like your does it change your physicality when the number gets that high, or when the
No,
historical significance, like,
it
does anything
it
tighten up
doesn't
at all?
really. It doesn't. It's like I've been touching this stuff for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just like walking into the storybook of the violin. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh my God, like when Julie said that this fiddle was coming next week, I was like giddy because I was a fanboy of this violin.
Mhm.
As weird as that sounds. I was like, I can't believe I'm gonna get to see this thing. I've only seen pictures.
So, Ian, I think we're probably at a good point where we
Yeah.
can stop and open it up for any questions if anybody has any, and I'll flip the camera around.
Let's see here. So Dave Keeley, I'm gonna start calling on people. Dave Keeley, ask a question.
Let's see your bow reherring jig. Do you use one?
I don't do any bow work.
Good for you. I wish I didn't either.
Yeah, because we saw stuff back there looked like bow business happening over there, but just one bow for test driving.
Oh yeah, that's exactly. I've got a kind of a decent Nuremberger Seuss fiddle bow that walked into the shop that I purchased from somebody. It's like the only thing I've ever of any significance that way that I've ever come across in 30 years. And then one's just a cheap cello bow, couple $100 deal. Just for test drives.
Did you say you went to school or you apprenticed when you first started?
I just apprenticed. I got super lucky. I was actually got paid to learn, albeit not much. It was like $3 an hour or something when I started.
Well, you must have had a good teacher.
He was a good teacher for sure. It was just a crazy stroke of luck. And obviously at this point it was just meant to be.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm doing what I should be doing this lifetime. Like, I have an aptitude and an knack to do the work, to sit and be quiet and just,
Yeah.
like all of us. It's like we all are kind of doing the same thing, but it's completely foreign. Like I know we're all sharpening tools, but when it comes to guitar stuff, I don't know a thing about them.
I'd say the one thing that guitars has that's maybe probably the more challenging aspect is just the variance of the instrument that'll come across your bench.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, a lot of different materials, a lot of different building techniques, a lot of different, it's just,
Yeah.
I wish guitars were made like violins so you could take them apart easily and put them back together.
I completely agree. Like when I was first cutting my teeth, my mentor would be like, "Yeah, so and so bring the guitar over. You're gonna fix that." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." He's like, "Yeah, you are." And I was like, "So I'm probably doing as much damage as I'm fixing because." And then you realize you can't take them apart. It's like, wow, that's frightening how much labor it takes to open them up. And where's the fiddle? It's like pretty simple, really.
yeah, we do a lot of building a ship in the bottle, trying to go through the sound hole to do crazy
Yeah,
work on braces that
yeah.
if the braces don't work, then the guitar flies apart.
Yeah.
Any other
And
questions?
it's so hard. You think, oh yeah, I can get in there and work. You don't have the room.
I have a question, sort of something I picked up along maybe reading about violins, and I'm not. It's sort of anyway. The idea I had was that French makers were imitating Italian violins, but they saw that the tops had caved a bit on the Italian violins, and so they arched them higher and then the French violins then accordingly sounded worse than the Italian violins, and the Italian violins were sort of engineered with a certain amount of weakness for sound production. Is that
Yes, yes. So it in effect, like the Italian arch, like comes up from the blocks, and then in the middle it kind of flattens out. It should be it's still a tiny bit positive, but that's what they kind of refer to as a saddle. Whereas the French started doing kind of a catenary curve, kind of like rainbow one end to the other. And so that kind of has a more atonal direct sound. Whereas the subtlety of that arch in the Italian shape gives it a more complex sound. Is how I'd simplify that. What you just
do you think the Italians are building in weakness for additional like vibrational
yeah, for sure. It's all like I'm sure like with guitar making, it's all about mass versus stiffness and where to have it and where to not have it.
Mhm.
And so, like fiddles are, typically thickest in the middle and radiate outward towards the thinner parts, so it's like, say it's 3 millimeters in the middle of the top, and then it's, 2.5 in the middle of the bouts, and 2-2 or whatever, and towards the edges. I mean, it varies with every piece of wood, and every graduation is completely unique to itself, really. Like people have mapped out Stradivari's like on a topographical map kind of imagery, and there's not one of them is the same as the next. Like the thick spot changes, so whatever it was that they were doing, we can only speculate because we don't really know what they were doing, and that's the the Cremonese violin is one of the great mysteries of humanity. Is it like you got Amati, 1550 Andre Amati, then you have his kids, and then you have Niccolo. The plague comes through, knocks a bunch of people out, and then Niccolo starts training outside the family for the first time in 150 years, and then you get the Ruggieris and the Guarneris, and then this new guy shows up, Stradivari, and he's got a couple of kids, and then Strad lives to be 93. His kids live into their 70s. Del Jesu dies early at 45 years old, and then 50 years later, the world says, "How come those instruments from Cremona are the ones that everyone loves the most?" And then that hanging question mark is still there. Everyone wishes they knew what that methodology actually was. Because, like, if you go back to the beginning of the Cremonese violin, it's like the bar was set like really high the first time. It wasn't like, oh, here's an evolution of Andrea's work, where it was like, this was terrible and it just kept getting better. It just started out awesome. So somebody probably hired this guy to make an instrument in this fashion. That's the kind of current thought anyway. Like he was just a craftsman taking orders from somebody who had this brilliant idea of the violin family.
Did he have examples of the previous makers in his collection, or did he have anything to go by, or was he building off of sketches, or what?
I think sketches. I think it was sketches, and somebody gave this guy this idea. Is what I think it is. And it was like, we're going to use these materials. They're going to be this size and this size and this size. Like the C-bouts, like an interesting thing about C-bouts in Cremona is like that dimension is super static. They didn't really monkey with that at all. Whereas they change upper bouts, they change lower bouts, they change lengths, but the C-bout is always the same. Almost. So that's just some interesting stuff about the Cremonese violin, and it sucked in like hundreds and thousands of people through the years of like, what is this? Like brilliant researchers and stuff, and like people had careers as engineers. Like it's like a side interest, and it's like once you get sucked in, it's like you're just along for the ride.
Uh-huh.
So there really is something different for you from the violins that followed after that 50-year gap. There's something that sound wise, or that really, it's not like
there's
not a myth.
It's like hearing that Isai Del Jesu was like being in the same room with it was just like my arm hair stood on end. I was like, wow, I've never heard that. And so there's just this certain sparkly, silvery singingness to those instruments that I can't do it. I mean, I know a lot of modern makers been having really good success. Like it's a new renaissance of violin making. It's never been better as it is right now. So say like the 70s and 80s was kind of the doldrums of making altogether, and it's like it's caught fire again, and people are making some amazing things these days.
Oh,
like aesthetically and tonally. But to get back to the golden period of Cremona, it's just going to cost you a lot of money.
is there any, it seems like you're chasing something that you're never going to get though, because like, I mean, those instruments have like, several centuries of break-in period. It's like,
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
you'll never know if you built something as good until like 300
No,
years
it's
later,
true.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like this, it's definitely outside of our lifetimes for sure.
It's not a very
You do the
American
best
thing.
you can, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a
I mean,
very
as a
American
guitar,
thing.
you're trying to do the best you can. And there's always things you're contemplating and pondering and attempting and hoping that it's working.
How many?
Michael,
It's such a sound is such an interesting mystery. Mhm.
Sorry, how many Cremonese violins that are unaltered arching wise are there? I assume that most of the Strads have been modified to some degree, or
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so if you just put it into a percentage thing, 10% of strads are still amazing, and the rest of them fall in whatever percent off of that. A lot of them like have lost, they've been wiped of all their original varnish and unqualified restorers putting patches in and changing things, and so like that Jupiter Strad, like that thing still has all of the Stradivari bells and whistles. It was so pristine. It's probably hardly been apart. It doesn't even really have any cracks, and it has all its original edges. And I was talking with one of the gals who's a player out there, and she's like, there was another Strad in at the same time, and that I could tell it had more work done, more cracks and things. And she's like, this one's really accessible for most people. If they played it, they'd probably like this one better than the Jupiter. But if you're a really talented player, that Jupiter is going to give you everything and more. And that's kind of what the magic of a pristine instrument from Cremona brings.
thank
are
you.
those instruments like, are they, does it require a really sensitive player to get the juice out of it? Like, like,
Yeah, some people they play that Jupiter and they'd be like, I don't know how to do this. It'd be like driving an F1 car.
mhm,
It's like you have to drive an F1 car fast enough for the ground effects to work,
mhm.
to actually push the car back onto the ground. And if you can't do that, like that's the dynamic range that Jupiter probably has as an analogy. So if your bow arm isn't fast enough, so you're gonna miss like a lot of that juice.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Those things are like hot rods for sure.
Michael, are you building guitars for 300 years from now?
Oh, I'd like to think so, but probably not.
You never know.
So
You never know.
yeah,
That's
I'm
a nice
just
thing.
I'm just trying to enjoy this life and not think about fame and fortune after I'm
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it'd be a shame for it to happen after you're gone, Like, I think I'd be resentful from beyond the grave.
Yeah, that's what usually happens often.
So the arguably the best violin maker ever, Del Jesu is a nickname. Giuseppe Bartolomeo Guarneri was his actual name. He died broke at 45. Like he could not make a living making violins.
Uh-huh.
He was arguably the best, if not the second best maker. So I just use that as a very humbling approach when I'm doing stuff.
Well, I made it past 45, so I got him beat.
Well, didn't they found some ledgers from Antoine? Didn't they find he was like
Like there's census records and things, so it's like there's some stuff, and then there's like some sort of, I think they found his will.
but he was like the
And-
wolf was scratching at his door all the way up to the end, I think. Like I don't
Yeah, he was very famous. Strad was very famous in his time.
Yeah.
Like all the kings, the courts and things were placing orders, and Bergonzi, who lived in Cremona, said in one of his manuscripts they found was like, we all live under the shadow of Strad.
Mhm.
And then when
Was
you
he-
see some of Strad's output, especially in the later 20s, you can almost see the hand of some of these other players. So he may have employed some of these guys. Like Bergonzi may have done some work for Strad. Del Jason may have done some work for Strad. So it's pretty interesting.
Very cool. What do you think, Michael? Should we've had him for 2 hours, like.
I got a quick
Yeah.
question. I was kind of waiting for the topic to change a little bit before I switch gears on you. So, most of us are guitar repair techs, myself included. But in my area, there are zero, to my knowledge, violin repair shops, a few builders. But I see a good number of violins come through my door. And unfortunately, I didn't have the pleasure to work with anybody to train in that realm. So I'm always looking for great new resources, whether it's books or videos. Iris Cars have been a great help for some of that stuff, what I can access of her that's within my realm. So that's my question. Is there any good resources that you would recommend for people who, obviously aren't at the level you are, but kind of want to just expand their knowledge?
It's a great question, and I know Iris does, like, her stuff is really cool, and she's like top-notch player in this game for sure. Her work's incredible, and I have watched some of her videos, and so you can learn a lot of it's kind of advanced stuff. As far as like basic setup things and whatnot, it's like I'm not really sure. There aren't really a lot of great resources. Like I'm sure YouTube is full of people showing some of the things that they do, and but whether it's good advice or helpful, I'm not sure. I don't have a great answer for your question.
There isn't a lot of resources for fiddle grade, because a lot of people, whether they're keeping a fleet of rentals going or in a bluegrass community or an old time community, there isn't a lot of that, a lot of resources for that level of repair and restoration. But let alone rehairing a bow that the hair stays in, like.
Yeah, right. Like Red Wing, Minnesota has an instrument program that you could go. That's like semesters worth of things to do, kind of thing. So that's not like that's a resource, but it's not an easy one.
I'm in a pretty remote area, and when I first started, I went to the junk stores and just bought all these old smashed, beat up factory fiddles. And I think I like 30 of them for $100 from this one in store, and just spent weeks trying to put them back together and figure out how they're made and learning how to work with Barnett. Just
I mean that's really that's the best way to do it if you have an interest. Like you just work on junk, and it just becomes less and less junky as you get better. I mean, I still work on anybody who comes to my door. I'll work on what they got. I'm happy to help out a sixth grader, or I've got a lot of college kids that come. I don't turn away anybody's business unless it's just totally not worth the effort.
All right. Anybody else? Last call for questions.
I might have a question if it's possible, a quick one. So,
Sure.
First of all, thanks for a very interesting presentation. My name is Giuliano. I am Italian, living in France, and I am an acoustic engineer and a guitar builder. I am very interested in everything that is related to the analysis of the guitar and characterization of the performance via technical measurement, such as acoustical measurements and others. And I know also that in the violin community, also there is a lot of movement in the recent years. I was wondering if this is something that you think that might be interesting for your job, for example, to characterize such a exclusive instrument in performances when you when you collect instruments, or if it is developing within the community the use to perform measurements on instruments?
Yeah, there's always like an active community of people doing things when it comes to like trying to get technology involved and try to check dynamic outputs of these instruments, like three-dimensional images as they're being played and the flexibility modes and stuff. There's a lot of data being collected, but at the end of the day, it just kind of becomes data, and so sometimes that's all it really is, because it's hard to be subjective about what you're actually hearing. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
I know there's a lot of computer work being done out there and ways to track certain things, and I think it's helped some people improve their making. But I don't know where it's going, but in the future, I'm sure some great things will probably arise from some of this data collection and be able to help modern makers. Hopefully, I mean, we'd all just like to recreate the beautiful Cremonese sound is really the long and short of it. But beyond that, I can't really speak to it. Like I used to be really interested in stuff like that. And as I'm getting older and just doing the work that I do, I used to track the auctions and things. I just don't do as much of it as I used to, so I can't really be much help that way. So
I'll show you
Cool.
Giuliano's book.
oh, so I'd love to see it.
That's really good. Cool. Well, Michael, should we let this fella get back to writing repair tickets?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for everybody's patience. We had some
Oh, yeah.
technical difficulties, but I hope that those smoothed out, because I think there's a lot of really great information here, and I learned, even though I've known Lee for a while, I learned quite a few things today. So I hope you did as well.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't bore you guys to tears.
Oh no, I'm super excited and I really appreciate it. And I would like everybody to unmute and say thank you to Michael and Lee for a stellar presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Appreciate it.
And
Thanks, everyone.
yeah, Lee,
Thanks,
you're welcome here anytime. So if
Okay, yeah, if you ever want to have me back, I'm game.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, everybody, the leaf long is in full effect, and I'll see you all later. Jerry Hayes, you got any time to gab?
Yes, sir.